And now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Peter Piot, Director of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and one of the world's leading virologists. Peter has written a fascinating memoir of his life and work. Um, Here it is, No Time to Lose. And you can see it's been very well paged, it's been in the bath, it's been all over. Um, and it's been mainly read by Jenny. I've read it too, but Jenny was totally engrossed for a couple of weeks that it took her, and I didn't get a look in during that time, Peter. So, but I'll give you the short version, not of the book, but of Peter's life. He co-discovered the Ebola virus. He headed UNAIDS during the most critical HIV years, and he arguably has the greatest insight of any virologist into the nature of COVID. And you'll understand why in the conversation with Danny.
David, thank you so much. And you've Peter got the wrong member of my family, because my wife is a consultant epidemiologist with a specialty in AIDS, actually, as well as in BSc. So this at least gives me the advantage of knowing whom I'm talking to and realizing just what a guru we have with us. So thank you so much for being here and for agreeing to answer my questions. I wanted to start with this. You said something quite arresting in your description of your own COVID diagnosis and illness, that you had great respect for the virus. I think particularly for the AIDS virus because of its trickiness, but I think for viruses in general. Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, thanks, Danny, and hello to see. Good to see, everybody. David and Lorraine, a long time ago since we saw each other. So I'm glad you're doing this on World AIDS Day, because one of my big concerns today is that with the COVID pandemic, that people forget about AIDS, and that's it is, since the Spanish flu, the biggest pandemic, as David said. Yeah, my respect for viruses, well, certainly for the HIV virus. And we just heard from Shafiq why we still don't have a vaccine against HIV, which was discovered or isolated in 1983. So that is 37 years ago. Even if in 84, Margaret Hackler, who was then the Secretary for Health and Human Service in the US, said within 5 years, we will have a vaccine. You will be an American, we'll have made a vaccine. And and that is because this is a incredibly smart virus. It actually infects the cells that are supposed to defend us against the virus. And so it's a kind of Trojan horse strategy. And we never succeed in eliminating it. There are only a few people in the whole world who have been able to get really rid of the virus. So and they're adapting. And with COVID, my respect went up also when I had it, not only because I'd never been ill in my whole life, so I was being lucky. I'm 71. So, however, what's clear now is that it's not because this is a respiratory virus, transmitted virus, that it only affects the lungs. It affects every single cell in the body. I had heart problems. I still, I had atrial fibrillation and so on, in addition to lung problems. But some people have kidney problems. They even end up on the renal dialysis. The liver can be affected, the brain, skin, joints, all body organs. And these viruses, frankly, you wouldn't expect it, because a virus cannot survive without living cells, from plants or animals or us human primates, because they don't have the enough of the machinery to reproduce and so on. So they're constantly looking for others, for virus, for hosts, and then they adapt. And some of these viruses, like probably also virus that causes COVID, but also like the one Ebola and SARS and so on. They live happily in bats, and have been there, who knows, for centuries, who knows, without causing any problem. And then they attack us, and yeah, and they will not rest until they have found all the susceptible individuals. And with HIV, it was the same. It's just a bit slower, and it's different mode. It's sex mostly and mother to child, but yeah. So it's fascinating.
Do you think it's over ambitious, the targets we've now set ourselves, that everyone's been talking about, the actual elimination of HIV? Is that feasible, or is that just politicians' talk?
Yeah, I think it's another case of medical hubris and political naivete, maybe with populism. But let's not forget there's only one virus that infects us humans that has been eradicated. That's smallpox. And there's one that infects other animals. That's it. Polio, we're close, but it's been predicted for the last 20 years that we'll eliminate it. Um, but what we can do is we can bring it to levels that are, you know, very low, and so that we as societies we can live with it. But eliminating, that's why I was never a fan of the slogan eliminating HIV by 2030. I thought also, what have they been smoking? That's particularly a virus that is sexually transmitted predominantly, so you don't know what's going on, but it infects lifelong. Uh, you know, but I think we can live. I think more in terms of societies living with HIV. It's not only it's people living with HIV, societies living with HIV, and we'll have also societies living with COVID. But thanks to a vaccine, all that will be probably be suppressed, and that's what we can aim for. And that would be good, no?
So, a lot of the time we talk about non-pharmaceutical interventions, behavioural interventions. Um, in your view, how much of a role does that really play in the ending control of the virus? Because it we've learned with COVID that you can carry it on for some period of time, but in the end that begins to crumble. There was all that social science discussion at the beginning. Were people that resilient? Well, I think we've discovered that after a while they do tire of it, and it is hard to reinforce these non-pharmaceutical interventions, and we're reaching probably the limit of it now, maybe just as the cavalry is coming over the hill. But what is your view? Are you a sort of a skeptic of these interventions over more than the merely short run?
Well, first of all, these interventions, be it the bulldozer ones, the lockdowns or more refined ones with testing and tracing and so on in some countries, they have succeeded in bringing down the number of infections to very low levels all over Europe. Um, Africa has done actually, in general, a much better job than Europe, acting earlier, although we don't understand. East Asia, Southeast Asia. So it works, and it's not rocket science. I mean, it's frankly um, pretty medieval, nearly. I mean, keep distance, face mask, no handshaking, no touching, and then in addition, trying to isolate, but then try to identify people through testing and then tracing their contacts. And what I find fascinating is that when you look at East Asia and Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, South Korea, I mean, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Vietnam, Laos, they're applying exactly the same measures as that are being advocated here by the governments in the UK and in Europe, and yet they basically suppress the virus nearly completely. Whereas here it doesn't work. We need lockdowns, and I was just on the in a conference with someone from Singapore and so on, and there it was already in the middle of the night there, but life is back to normal except you can't get in, you know And what's the big difference is that people there, they respect the rules of the game. And and for example, face masks have been a tradition for about 100 years since the Spanish flu in the case of Japan. So when you have a cold, your running nose or whatever, you wear a mask, and it's not to protect yourself, but it's to protect the community. Um, and I think that maybe we are paying a price here for our hyper individualistic Western society spirits. Like I want to do what I want, and that's it, and damn the rest. So this is something where we need to have some collective, well, it's solidarity in a sense, and by our individual acts, we not only protect and save our lives as our own one, but also others. I mean, I'm getting into a philosophical type of
No, no,
consideration, but I
that's
think we are.
that was the nature of the question I asked. Just on a sort of more prosaic question, it sounds from that as though you're not doubtful about the efficacy of masks. Some people are saying the evidence base isn't that strong. We're all wearing these masks. People really resent it, find it difficult. It really possibly prevents trade and other and travel. Maybe that's its advantage. But are you much more a pro? Much more solidly and convincingly pro mask?
Yeah, definitely. I'm already in February. I called the BBC for generalized mask wearing, and it's also an example of scientists where the best is the enemy of the good, because indeed there are no randomized controlled trials and masks and so on, and some of the scientific advisors to the government or in general, they saying it's the evidence is not so strong. It's like there's no evidence that a parachute, protects you against jumping out of a plane because there are no randomized trials. But there is strong circumstantial evidence. When you look at in the US, for example, unfortunately, is a natural experiment because many people refuse to wear masks. Some states hardly any mask, and there's such a strong correlation between wearing mask and having fewer infections. But also now there is laboratory evidence. It's not 100%, but it goes into both directions. It protects you from being infected, and it protects the others that you don't infect them. And that's probably enough. Also, it even if some virus particles will escape, there will be much fewer of them, so that's the dose will be less. So yeah, I think it's and it's cheap, it's so easy, side effects, except if you would have severe asthma and so on, okay, then we can all understand that. um, so I don't understand the fuss that people are making about it, but and in some countries it's pure political, it's
Yes.
become a political issue.
Can I ask you about one of the organisations that wasn't sort of sure, wasn't sounded an uncertain note on the subject of masks was the World Health Organization, and you've obviously got a very broad experience of the World Health Organization. David Cameron, with whom I've worked quite a bit, said to me, he at one point wanted to make the reform and improvement of the World Health Organization and dedication to WHO, but on a new basis. One of the sort of themes of his premiership, and was told, really don't bother with that, it won't work. So where are you on the spectrum, by the way, of which lasts from doubters of its purpose through to doubters of its efficacy?
Yeah, no, I mean, the world needs something like the World Health Organization. I think this pandemic is probably the best or the worst. I mean, the illustration to that for that. Um, and but does that mean that the World Health Organization is as it is now is what the world needs? The answer is no. I think it should be, it has to be reformed. And I know that Dr. Tedros, the director general of the WHO, he himself he says that he wants to reform it, and I hope that the Biden administration, that I hope that they will rejoin to start with, but also that they will say, okay, we'll rejoin, but less bureaucracy, no more transparency. They were very slow in declaring that this is a pandemic. And that's with all these committees. But there are inherent problems with the governance, because their shareholders, to say so, are all the member states. And there is China, and there is Russia, and there's South Africa, and there's Venezuela, and there is Iran, and there is the UK, and so on. And they have mutually exclusive interest. And I was confronted with that. I was under Secretary General of the UN, and when I was head of UNAIDS, and I had to manage that. And my approach was to make sure that I never would have everybody against me, but then you manage and you can lead on very concrete things. And I think on epidemics, that's what the world needs, but it needs reform. And it's a lot of it is, let's with a very boring word, is human resource reform, performance management, and also making sure that it is not trying to do everything. For example, WHO is doing research, which it should never do. It's not equipped for it. And what its main um, function and its main asset is that it's neutral convening power, that it's not influenced by national governments, by commercial interests when it makes recommendations for how to treat HIV. That's one thing, but how to approach an epidemic and so on. But if you do the research yourself, then you're judge and jury. You can't do that. So I think, ironically, I don't think it's a matter of bigger budget, but of having the right people, right leadership. And I think with Dr. Tedros, I really think he's a good leader. And then saying, we're going to do these 3 or 4 things and forget about the rest. And that's easier said than done, of course. And particularly since any reform has to be approved by all the member states. And yeah, that's the big issue.
Always
Yeah.
difficult. In a minute, I'm hoping that people who are on the call who want to ask you a question will do so. There's a Q&A button, everyone will know, and they can put your questions in, but I still have a couple myself. The first is sort of straightforwardly, I guess, for the small p political one. What is your view about how Britain has handled the pandemic? I mean, you could say, look, you're going to get variance in Europe over how well countries do, right? Somebody's got to end up being at one part of the normal curve. What we're seeing is just variance, and a little bit of, it's more urban, people are traveling through it more, we got it earlier. Other people say, we locked down too late, we were pursuing, the advice the government got wasn't good enough, the Prime Minister didn't interrogate it enough, our testing system didn't work. Where are you, again, on that spectrum?
I'm relatively mild for not just in Britain, but for the leadership in political leadership in the first wave, in the sense that nobody had ever been confronted with this kind of problem, and I can imagine that it was not easy to estimate, how bad this would become. But we started too late with the lockdown, and with certain decisions. That's the benefit of hindsight. And when you compare to Germany, which is probably the country in Europe that has the best in the first wave, with strong leadership from Chancellor Merkel, who's a physicist by training. Her chief of staff is an anesthesiologist by training. I mean, they have a kind of a pretty scientific way of thinking. I've met Chancellor Merkel several times, and you can follow how it goes on in her brain. And then they decentralized, they started testing, they developed their test. But at the same time, with strong central leadership, Germany is a very decentralized country with a Länder, for historic reasons, very old history, and also nobody wants after World War II, a very strong central power. And so that's how it was implemented, with very strong local involvement. Here, still even today, we're trying to do everything out of Westminster and just very centralized. And I think it is really going to be, now we're doing how to say, now it's getting better again, I think, but we wasted so much time in the summer after we had been fairly successful in suppressing the spread of the virus by not setting up a more efficient testing, tracing system. And that was really bad. When I got sick, in March, I didn't meet all the criteria. I couldn't get testing. So I had to go some private place because I had a friend in Harley Street, okay? Um, but it was such a disorganization, and and I think that that is something that the country has not done well. Ironically, the two countries that came on top of a ranking of countries in their preparedness for epidemics, the Global Pandemic Preparedness Index or something like that, and who was number one? The U.S. Number two, UK. These are two countries that have not done well at all, and and it is interesting. It's countries with a female prime minister or president. They have done very well, and countries that, I mean, that may be pure coincidence with New Zealand, Taiwan, Finland, just name it. Um, but yeah, I think we've not done well. Also, I came out when I was recovering, and because I was upset. I was upset about the communication by the government, and it was flattening the curve, protecting the NHS. It was the reproductive rate, and then as an afterthought, and we're going to save people and save lives. And this is about people, and that's not been the case. The fact that, for example, the NHS excluded primary care and the GPs, which is one of the strengths of the NHS. I mean, you can say many things about the NHS, what doesn't work and so on, but the primary care network is a strength. Not many countries have that, but they were excluded, and they're closer to the community, etc. So there are many mysteries to me how it went. But now I hope that there isn't going to be, to say, giving in to pressure to reopen again in with Christmas and all that in a big way, because I know what will happen. We'll have a third wave and more deaths. There's no way, and that's the way it is. You're on mute, Danny.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, one quick question of my own before bringing in a couple of questions from other people. Some people are now talking about, we're near the end now. Life will be back to normal by Easter. Does that language resonate with you? Would you use it yourself?
Sorry, which language?
The language of "we'll be back to normal by Easter."
Um, I I doubt that will be the case to start with. I think 21 will be much better than 2020, except for all the inequities and the social damage that is the fallout of this epidemic. That's where we're going to see that in full blown in 21. We start seeing it now. But going back to normal, I think will be gradual process, because rolling out vaccination is not going to be that easy. We start. I mean, there's a good plan, I think, but it will, by the summer at least. Yeah, I think for lots of people will be increasingly um, normal. But I also hope that we will have some more profound cultural changes. For example, that when, even with vaccination and so on, and nobody knows how long they protect it. Is it 1 year, 5 years, for life? Who knows? We'll need to figure that out. But that we will still wear a mask, like in Japan, when you have a running nose, when you have a cold, and we kind of change a bit. But Easter, I think, is a bit optimistic. We've had too many statements of world leading this and we'll beat that and so on. I'm sorry, but I'm not a politician. I'm a bit on the understated type of Flemish guy, so that's different.
Lawrence Gould, what has this question very, which relates to the points we've just been discussing. So, at what level, what percentage of vaccinations do you believe it will be needed to stop the disease?
Yeah, very good question, because that's what when we talk about herd immunity, that's what we have to reach for a vaccine. And we know, for example, for measles, it's very high. It has to be over, I think it's 93 or 95%. For others, it could be 50%. It's from what I have seen now, it's probably around 70%, 70, and at the minimum, which means that if there are too many people who are refusing the vaccination and so on, that could push that below the 70%. But the first thing that we can do is to protect certainly all the healthcare workers and the workers in care homes, plus those are most vulnerable, starting by age. The idea is to roll it out over 90, 85, etc., etc.
We can surely get to the point quite reasonably quickly where it's a more manageable disease.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and here's a final question. I think we better make it a final question because you've been busy all day, and I think that would be imposing on you to go any further. But Jenny Altschuler says, is there anything else the scientific community can do to increase their voice here?
I think the science has been, on the one hand, very active, unprecedented collaboration, also open science in the sense that publishing and putting on all these servers and websites and all that are very fast. I mean, the problem now is how to follow the avalanche of publications, and which is a better problem to have than, for example, when there was SARS, where everybody was keeping information for themselves and waiting to have the big paper. And I think also in terms of the scientific advice in many countries has worked. So I'm special advisor to Ursula von der Leyen for the president of the European Commission. And I can see there is a meeting. The UK, unfortunately, is no longer part of it. That's my view, but anyway. But the science advisors on COVID for Europe, they're meeting. We have a meeting every week, and we're debating stuff. But it should also be clear that scientists we advise, and it's actually those in power, hopefully elected by the people, they have to take the decisions. And one problem, of course, is that we scientists, we love to debate, we love to disagree, we love to argue, and that's how science progresses. So there's nothing wrong with that. But when you do that in public about these things, then that can undermine and also trust in science. So this is quite a complex thing. But I think science now has delivered or is delivering vaccines. I think we need to do a better job on treatment, because their advances have not been as spectacular. On the other hand, people die at about half the rate as in the spring. So that is not because of some spectacular progress. I mean, like dexamethasone, okay, it's shown by the Oxford group to work, but it's more like small improvements here and there. I compare it with childhood leukemia. That was when I was a student, 100% would die, and then every 5 years there was a little bit improvement, but here it goes faster. But I think also there's a need for social science in a big way here, and mental health fallouts, both of COVID directly and of the countermeasures, is something that we need to really pay much more attention to, and that will require also some good research.
Yeah, my friend, a doctor, and he had a son with childhood leukemia, and the doctor, they said to him, well, it might just keep pace with your son's disease, or it might not, and it just did, but it might not have done. So anyway, Peter, that was tremendous, and we could have gone on all day, but it would be rude to keep you any longer, because you've been so kind to give us your time, and I'm going to hand back now to David.
That was absolutely fascinating. And Peter, I can't let you go without one more question from Lorraine, who's on the panel, because this is a question that is of such importance to all of those who are working with HIV. So Lorraine, I'll let you ask the question. You put in the chat.
Thank you. I simply wanted to ask you, how does COVID-19 affect people who are HIV positive? Is it worse? Is it the same? Are they protected? Do we know?
Yeah, there's actually in South Africa, particularly in the Cape Town area, there's been some quite some research been going on, and at first sight, those who are on treatment, there doesn't seem to be that much of an impact. But I think the impact will may be different when you're not when your HIV infection is not under control, to put it this way. And also, I think the social impact is going to be there because a lot of the programs, supply chains have been interrupted. So in other words, people had no access to treatment and so on. But there is still quite some research going on, and I'm aware of it, particularly in Cape Town, but I haven't seen the latest of it. Because also for, COVID vaccines, will be very important to see people living with HIV. I mean, how do they react to the vaccine? Does the vaccine cause problems or not? And that's definitely very relevant in many parts of the world, certainly in Southern Africa, for example. Really good question.
Yeah. So thanks so much for answering that extra one, and Lorraine for asking it. Daniel, as always, like, you're getting better and better. Not that you were ever not wonderful, but the last couple of seminars with Alistair Campbell and tonight with Peter Piot have just been off the chart in terms of the depth and sensitivity of the discussion. So thank you both for a wonderful, wonderful half hour. And Lorraine, thank you for your earlier contribution. We have, I know there's a question from Jill Lewis, who's an early question, but perhaps I can put Jill's question separately to you after, and you can answer by email or whatever to Jill, Lorraine, and some of the other questions, I'm sorry we haven't had a chance to get to. So just thanks everyone for being here, and particularly thanks to our contributors and to our two organizations that have joined on World AIDS Day to be together in solidarity and to work together in the future, Pata and Africa Tikkun. And thanks to all your members and supporters for being with us. Everyone have a great evening, and hope to see you at our next webinar.